So, welcome back. We are looking forward today to hopefully conclude this epistle, Igeres HaKodesh Yud Ches, which we're holding on Kuf Chav Zayin in the original text. Fourth line from the top, and perhaps we started that fourth line, that next beginning flow over here. However, it's a good place to start. V'chol ma sheyasmid lachshe b'sichlei, which literally is translated, the more the person will diligently think and develop this in his seichel, with his intellect. So what are we talking about over here? As we mentioned so many times, on the overall, the class should be utilized completely, or majority, the significant majority of the class should be utilized for the present class, not to recap the previous, namely because, so if you're watching, if you're part of the class, so you know what we're up to. This is probably the sixth class on this Igeres HaKodesh, this 18th Igeres. However, if not, it's truly a click away. You can see all the information of this very Igeres, for that matter, all the previous Igeres, all the previous epistles of this segment, Igeres HaKodesh. This is the fourth segment of Sefer HaTanya. We come across this idea a few times. We mentioned it, that there is 5 segments in Tanya Kadisha, Sefer Tanya Kadisha. It is with precision. This is the Teirah Shebiksav of Teirah Achsidus. So we merited to conclude in this very study, Likutei Amorim, Sharich B'Emunah, the first 3, and Igeres HaTshuva, and we're holding in the fourth, Igeres HaKodesh, which is distinct. We mentioned this also. We had a whole full presentation in the beginning of Yud of Igeres HaKodesh, the 8 back pretty much, which is also really a click away. Igeres HaKodesh is distinct the way it's set up. It's Igeres, it's not a sequential study, meaning to say that the first 3 are Pedic after Pedic after Pedic and so on. We spoke about this a few times, even the difference of Likutei Amorim and the Shaykh B'Emunah Igeres HaKodesh. However, Igeres HaKodesh is different. These are letters, epistles of the Alter Rebbe, said different times, different places, addressing different issues. Even though this is anything associated with the Alter Rebbe is of course timeless. Alter Rebbe was Eish Kodesh, Kodesh HaKadoshim, and every letter that he wrote, particularly those who entered into the into the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, not all the Alter Rebbe's letters entered into Sefer Tanya Kadisha. There's many letters of the Alter Rebbe. There's a compilation, formal compilation of the Alter Rebbe, known as Igros Kodesh of the Alter Rebbe. There's 32 letters entered into Sefer Tanya Kadisha. Of course, you could say more timeless. You could say that, but of course, it carries even a greater weight, if you will, of the timeless message of these very letters, of these very epistles. Wherever you're watching the classes over here, but of course we're referring to, when we say click away, we're referring to the original website, which all the previous classes are lined up, and the latter ones on top, which is easily accessed. For example, the last few classes on Yud Ches, to understand what we're holding, what we're learning, and then all the previous Igeres HaKodesh, all the way back to Igeres HaTshuva, Sharich B'Emunah, and Likutei Amorim from the very beginning. So it's the Tanya Online. There's the original website, Tanya Online, one word, easy, tanyaonline.com. Also, as we mentioned, there's the advantage of the way the class is set up, the separate scroll bar for the text, easy to follow. As we always say, wherever you're learning Tanya, Koi L'Choi, Tanya is Tanya. So, what we were learning in the last in the last classes, which we begin V'chol ma sheyasmid lachshe b'sichlei kosev zeh, to develop with his intellect this aspiration. What aspiration? What kasev? So really, see the previous classes, and if you're following, you know exactly what we're talking about. Alter Rebbe, let's try to make it very brief. It speaks about 2 Abba. It begins 2 loves. One a superior, one more irregular. As he quotes the beginning, he begins actually the epistle with the pasuk V'shleim Melech Ma'yafis U'Mayana Amt Abba B'Tanugim. It's about a sweetness of a love associated with pleasure, delight, which is already in the bosom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the embrace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is a very deep, pleasurable love as HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, when we say a pleasurable love, this is real, like a person's pleasure biting into a sandwich after a hungry afternoon, as an example. There's pleasure there. This is the way Hashem created the human organism, that there is pleasure, expressions of pleasure which come through different channels in the human condition, with the human condition. And so too, we talk about a pleasure. It's not a Ava B'Tanug, it's not a badge, of course not. It's Ava, it's real passionate love. And Ava B'Tanugim, it's real pleasure. And probably greater pleasure than any other pleasure a person could imagine, because the pleasure in the embrace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can't describe it, because besides any description usually minimizes the depth of any matter. But in this case, it's not something or someone experiences it or not. And he says clearly, this is a high level in the Yid's connection with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. It says Simchut Tzadikim B'Hashem. It's usually, generically, it's the Tzadik, which has that Tainug in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avarabba B'Tanugim, the Alter Rebbe alludes to it in Perek Tes of Likutei Amorim. You could see he contrasts there, which is pretty similar, the Abba Tanugim to Abba Kirishpei Eish. The person is driven to something. You're driven, you're not there yet. Abba B'Tanugim is you're there, you're basking in the experience, and as such, the pleasure, it's not only a drive to something, it's a pleasure with something. In this case, he has a pleasure. Simchot Tzadikim Hashem, it's a simcha more than mitangim. Yisane Gal Hashem, which is a pasuk which we say on Shabbos. This is a great level, and he says over here, it's not so simple that everybody could reach it. The person has to be Misyageh and Yiddish Shemaim again. You can see it all in the previous classes. A click away, and then Alter Rebbe goes on, and then there's the Ava, a second level of Ava Shenis. He says, Ava the Nevesh desires and loves and aspires and pines to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And never wants to sever. It's like a child never wants to have a relationship with their parents. In other words, we gave an example. Your amusement park. Child goes and he's all excited about everything else, but the moment he turns around, doesn't see any of its parents, anybody they recognize, devastation kicks in instantaneously. Yeah, but I'll give you a bracelet. Don't worry, calm down. You go on every single ride you want. No, I'm not interested. I just need to see one of my parents or my family members. The overall parents is an example. Taking their child to a amusement park as an example. A child never wants to sever the relationship or disconnect with their parents, even for a moment. So it doesn't mean they don't go to school or anything, but there's a mindset. Yeah, I'm in school now. But when they're in the public and they know there's a disconnect, it's devastation. That's the inherent connection of Yid to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's something, that's what he says, this shein is really, it's attainable, and not only attainable, it's inherent within every single Yid. We are bonim LaKadosh Baruch Hu, bonim atam Hashem Alikeichem. We're children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A Yid, famous expression of the Alter Rebbe, nicht will, nicht kann sein abgerissen von the Elokus, from the Meibishne Yid, not he wants to, and not even can. This sever their connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The fact that you see certain people do silly things, that's why the Torah classified as a ruch shtus. It's a spirit of folly. The Alter Rebbe brings it over here in this Tanya, or this Perek over here also. He said because it's deep, and it's not necessarily on the surface that much. The person's not so much passionate about it. It's deep. Deep, there's a virtue to that also. We spoke about it in the previous classes. The Achoy Sira Yossi. Let's not repeat. Depth in a love is not only healthy. It's perhaps has a priority over a passionate love. We give the difference of a spousal relationship as opposed to a sibling relationship. There, it's more. It could reach a passionate level, while the sibling is not meant to. But there's no such thing as total disconnected divorce. It could be something peripherally on the surface, the family rivalry, but there's no real disconnect because you're really one. Spousal relationship, they're not really one. It's one which is established. Therefore, on the surface it could become passion. It's meant to periodically, but it's the point or the constant connection. But there could be a disconnect. It could be a divorce because it's not inherent. It's not innate. That's what the pasuk said. Pasuk lagani achoisi kalo. That's the two types of relationship he has with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So here he speaks about the achoisi, but in other words, the inherent love he has. The Kodesh Baruch Hu never wants to disconnect with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. We are bonim. We are inherently connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu. But for this, because it's deep, the ruach shtus, as he says over here, the spirit of folly, which could bring a person to sin, could somewhat creep in and have an impact. Therefore, a person has to strengthen himself, as he says, to allow that deep love to be manifest, to express itself. And he goes on over here, different type of meditation, simply to keep this love intact, in line, and so on. And again, you've got to see even the way it flows into this very, where we're starting today, but just a click away, the very last class. But we'll go on at this time. And the more the person will diligently, assiduously think and develop in it with his intellect this aspiration, this pine to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kol cho yizgaber v'yispashet kesav zeh, gam b'fiv v'chol ivado. So too, it'll strengthen itself and it'll express itself. It'll be manifest and express itself also in the person's mouth, literally translated in all his limbs. What does that mean? Lasi b'teira mitzvahs. That would kick in a constant, consistent learning Torah, expression of learning Torah, and doing Hashem's mitzvahs. L'dovka bahem to cleave in HaKadosh Baruch in Torah mitzvahs, Hashem mamash. It's bahem or Hashem mamash. It's the same thing as he goes on to say, meaning that because this love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this ava, nefesh misava v'yehevez v'chafetz l'dovka b'Hashem litzir b'tzir ha'chaim, and the kirves alikim toiv lo ma'od, and the closeness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's so good. It feels that this is where it not only feels good as an external type of calm and serenity which that closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings. But beyond that, this is the innate sensation the Yid has, or the innate connection he has with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're truly children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so the more we bring it to the fore, the more we bring it up to the surface, the more we have it, is developed intellectually, meaning that it captures our cognitive faculties, our mind, and eventually our heart. That would lead immediately that it would be expressed as well in our mouth, with all our limbs, meaning to say, to learn Hashem's Torah, do Hashem's mitzvahs. And it's not like, oh, the idea itself is not enough, it has to come into one's mouth, as befiv, I use the literal translation, and all those limbs to occupy themselves in Hashem's Torah and Hashem's mitzvahs. What about that love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself? Answer is, this is what he's telling you. This is Hashem's self. When one party has a connection, feels a connection to the other, and that there is a passionate connection, a love to the other, of course, there is an automatic interest and gravitation to embrace the other party. If it's a child and a father and a child, a mother and a child, it doesn't even take too much, because this is where the other party is. It's in their embrace. So you're going to say, what are you embracing? Your just hands are going around your child? I mean, just to have your hands around their back, around their arms? Don't you just love them? You don't love their arms? No, their arms are them. This is who they are, and therefore you're embracing them. That love expresses itself immediately in an actual embrace, not just that passionate love which beams from one heart to the other, but rather, much more than that, you immediately develop this closeness to really embrace physically with the other party. With a child as an example. And in the overall, when somebody likes the other party, they want to identify with what they stand for, who they are. If they need a favor, of course, they're running and say, oh, I love you, I don't care about really what you desire or what you stand for, or what you perhaps maybe want me to do for you. No, if you really love the other party, you're gravitating to establish, to allow this love to be manifest and express itself in all manners which would develop that additional, or the expression of that very closeness to the other party. And so too when he says the Yid loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he develops this in his mind, in his intellect. So automatically that would lead to that love, that aspiration to HaKadosh Baruch Hu would immediately express itself with a person's mouth. Literally means he would utter the words of Torah, which we know, we spoke about this many times, and Gemara Eidavin, it says that Chaim Heilam Mitzvim Lepeh, this is one of the ways he learns Torah, not only understanding the words of Torah, which is primarily the most important, as we know, understand the Tosfos, understand the Rosh, understand the Gemara, just reading it and not really understanding it is not really learning. If you don't understand it at all, you're not really learning at all. Lashon Alter Rebbe brings it later. And also, Le Mikri Limud Klal. a piece of Gemara is not Tehillim. You have to understand every word. Every word has to shine. A Rashi, probably Rashi means that. No, the point you got to understand the Rashi thoroughly. It's a Taisvis, a Rishon, it's a Achrin. Torah is about understanding. That's why we learn. That's why we kind the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, by understanding, appreciating it, perceiving the message thoroughly. But on top of that, that's what he says. Befiv, the Gemara says, the Eibushter says, look, I believe in context of the mitzvah of Limudat Torah, Chaim him l'metzi'eim epeh. We utter the words of Torah when we learn. You go into yeshiva, Amar Abaye, Amar Rabba. It's not, you'll never see a yeshiva as an example, as a library ambiance, which it should be. Apparently, people are deeply investing their intellectual faculties in the study of the Torah that they're learning, in the Chochmah Bin of Torah, Ki Chochmaschem Binaschem. It's an intellectual pursuit. It is. It truly is. So why the tumult? So there's more to it, but the starting point, because just like there's a way to learn, put on tefillin, there's a way to put on tzitzis, the way to eat the matzah, meaning to say that we just do it exactly the way it's prescribed to us in Shulchan Aruch. One of the ways he learns Torah is that he utters the words of Torah. On top of understanding, which is the primary engaging learning of Torah, is understanding what we learn, but we also utter the words. Now, we did speak about in the past where someone has a chavrusa, let's say, one says, okay, sometimes you could say both together, sometimes it's yishmak that you both together read, but let's say someone's listening to a shir. Does it mean they're not learning Torah, they're not mekayim the mitzvah of Torah at the time because they're not talking those very words that the Maggid Shir is saying, or any other words of Torah? Of course, they're fulfilling the mitzvah of Limudat Torah. Because in the overall, there's talk. The Maggid Shir is talking, you're listening, but then you're going to grab and talk to that very Maggid Shir, repeat again with your vocal cords, Chaim Metzi'eim Bepeh, and then you go back to your Chavrusa. You understand and you appreciate that the mitzvah of Limudat Torah is also about uttering, verbalizing the words of Torah. So at a certain time you're not. In the end of the day, you're of course Mekayim the mitzvah of Torah because you can appreciate this idea that it's about uttering the words. So now you're listening to someone who's uttering the words of Torah. But on the overall, there is that constant understanding and appreciation of this mitzvah associated with a peh, with a mouth, meaning to say one's uttering the words that they're learning, that they're understanding, that they're perceiving. So the Torah is a Kodesh Baruch Hu, is what he's going to get to. In other words, so too with all one's limbs. I'm going to put on tefillin and I'm going to make sure to do the mitzvah. Of course we do put on tefillin, but I'm going to do all the mitzvahs. I'm going to do it perfectly. I'm going to do it the hidur, because I know that's where the Eibushter is. It says in Zayir, mitzvahs are a varim de malka. There's the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You love your child. You're embracing their arm. Why are you embracing their arm if you love them? Yeah, because that's the them. The mitzvah are the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you're gravitating to the mitzvah. You're gravitating to Hashem's Torah because Hashem and His Torah are one, as He says it over here. The following few words. And the mitzvahs are the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this kasev, this aspiration, this pining to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which will immediately, the more you develop it in your seichel, in your intellect, it will extend itself. As Allah Shanabi, it will strengthen itself. It will manifest also in your mouth and in your limbs to occupy yourself in Torah mitzvahs. Learning Hashem's Torah, doing Hashem's L'davko bohem, to cleave in them, to adhere to them. B'Hashem mamash. It's to them, Torah mitzvahs, or Hashem or Hashem. What does it mean, L'davko bohem, into the Torah mitzvahs? B'Hashem mamash. The answer is, it's all one. Because he continues, Torah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not just a set of bylaws that HaKadosh Baruch Hu established. Let's get perhaps the world a little bit in order, so we're going to give a Torah. No. Neichi, says the Gemara, which is of course, Neichi is the first words of the Ten Commandments, which the Gemara says that Neichi is an acronym. Ano nafshi k'savis Yehovah. Hashem says, my soul I placed in Torah and I gave it over to you. Or I gave over my soul in Torah and I gave it over to you. Hashem is in Torah. Omer Abaye is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you will. Now take it out of context. Abaye is part of Torah, the evolution of Torah Shabbat Peh, but the Torah, every word of Torah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore you have to make a Birchas HaTorah. What if someone learns only one line in Torah? For that matter, he learns Omer Abaye. The other thing, does you have to make a bracha birchas HaTorah? And the answer is yes, of course. You have to mention Hashem's name in the birchas HaTorah. Yeah, that's the way we make birchas HaTorah with Hashem's name. But to read one line in the Gemara, we make a bracha for that? Or Amar Abaye in the Gemara? Open the Gemara say Amar Abaye, we make a bracha for that? Yeah, because the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in that Amar, and this is in Abaye, and the Hachi Ka'amar, and the Hach B'maya Skinon, and all the words, and again, the seichel behind the Gemara, the flow of the Gemara, that's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, because it's all one. So if you love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, it's going to be expressed and manifest in your dibur b'fiv, in your mouth, meaning to say, you know, occupy yourself in limidat Torah. And so too, he doesn't say this over here, but he says it famously. It has in Chav Gimel, look in Chav Gimel in Tanya, L'Kuti Amarim, it's a click away, that the mitzvahs are levorim the malchut, mitzvahs are the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you're embracing HaKadosh Baruch Hu by putting on film, by wearing. Is there any mitzvah that is related to you? Kosev says should be gilurav, ksiv tzoma nafshi, and this kosev means this aspiration, which is, of course, you worked on it to bring it to a greater level of manifestation, a greater level of revelation. This is what the pasuk says: tzoma nafshi, that my heart desires, my soul. My David HaMelech says, my soul pines to you, Hashem. Like someone pines and is thirsty and seeks to connect with water because they're so thirsty. But at that point, prior to they obtaining the water, it's a thirst to get to the water. It's a drive to get to the water. He doesn't have yet the water, because when you have the water in your hands, you take it for a sip, a cold cup of water in a desert, or if you're very thirsty, it's like a tainuk. It's a pleasure. You're not driven to something because you have it. And not only have it in your hand, you're experiencing the pleasure. That's a different type of ava, which was spoken about in the beginning of the page. Here, David HaMelech says, "So malachon nafshi," because here I'm driven, I'm pining, I'm thirsty to something. I do not have it yet. This is the ava shenis, because it's not about the tainuk, it's about the drive towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and which again, that drive itself expresses itself in the actual learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, as he just says. But the tainuk he does not have yet. The Rebbe continues and says, "V'gam al kosev zeh." He says, also this love, also this desire, also this aspiration, which is hidden within us, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we plead with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be with our assistance, to assist us, to take it out, to allow it to be free from its state of confinement, incarceration, literally mazgir mean, in state of confinement. What's the gam? Why the gam? Why also? Because this is a lower level of ava. One would say the ava, the tanugim, of course, it's such a deep level of ava. We ask Hashem, please, that we should fully experience it if we're on that level. As we mentioned before, not everybody could obtain that ava. As Alter made it very clear, usually it's generically simchot tzadikim Hashem. But one would say, there we need a special azer and a special assistance because we're talking about this lower level of ava, which is really related to every single yid. Apparently we could do it on our own. So Alter Rebbe says, no, even on that level of this ava, we plead with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please help us that it should not stay deep under the surface. It should come to the surface and over the surface. It should be manifest in our intellect, in our emotions, and namely in our thought, speech, and action, with our connection, our passion of learning Torah, our diligence of learning Torah, our constant learning Torah in general. But even when we sit down, no interruption because I'm connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why would I interrupt? And so too when it comes to the embrace of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu through a mitzvah. When it's on the surface, I'm doing it with greater perfection because I know that's where this is the limb of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm going to be having a very sensitive, and the embrace should be a right type of embrace. As an example, do the mitzvah with hidur and maybe mahadrim mina mahadrim, as an example. So we ask Hashem that it should not remain hidden; it should come to the surface. And the heart should be full with this love livado, and it should be the sole expression of love within the heart of the human being. Because we know, as Alter Rebbe made it clear at the very beginning of Tanya, the very first page of Tanya, for that matter, the heart has two compartments, where the ruach is, and that's where the nafsh elikis is situated. Even though the main state or situation of the nefesh elikis is in seichel, as Alter Rebbe makes it clear in the beginning of Tess, it's a click away, the beginning of the 9th chapter. It's truly a click away. Alter Rebbe says clearly where the nefesh elikis is situated, and then where the nefesh b'hami is situated is in the left side of the heart. Amali dam, with his blood, because there's a nefesh chayunis that vitalizes the body again. Alter Rebbe made it clear in the very beginning of Likutei Amorim, and then later in Peirik Tess, the beginning of Peirik Tess. So, you know, the nefesh elikis itself has, the heart is a satellite base for the nefesh elikis, the right side of the heart. Satellite because it's mainly situated in the brain. As it's explained so many, we actually spoke about it then at the beginning of Peirik Tess. Likutei Amorim, click away, first segment, 9th chapter. It has a satellite base in the heart, the right side of the heart. And then the left side of the heart, where there's more the flow of blood, that's where Nefesh Bahamis is based, primarily, not a satellite base. That's where it's based. Because the heart, Nefesh Bahamis is usually more, works with heart, less intellectual, its decisions are less intellectual, it's more heart decisions as we know it. It's the animal soul. Animals don't make decisions based on intellectual construct. So there's the primary base of the nefesh b'hami is in the heart, in the left side of the heart. Molei dam, because again, the chadam one nefesh, that's called the nefesh chayunis, what gives the person life. Again, we spoke about it in the first chapter and in the 9th. So we ask Hashem, let that love, which is in the heart, be the sole dominator of the heart. That the love of the nefesh b'hamis should not express it. Is it there? Yeah, of course it's deeply there, namely by the Beinoni. When it comes to the tzaddik, that was one important part of the centered doctrine of the Alter Rebbe. In the very first chapters of Likutei Amorim, the tzaddik has the ability to transform his nefesh b'hamis, not only subdue his nefesh b'hamis, but transform the nefesh b'hamis. You see in the beginning of the end of Yud, in the end of Tess, this very chapter, to Kimoi Yetzer, Nepach li'stev gomer, the nefesh b'hamis of the tzaddik has the ability to be completely transformed, to be truly, completely good, Kimoi Yetzer Tov Mamash, just like the Yetzer Tov itself. Which, of course, would be associated with the B'tanugim, which Alter Rebbe says in this very chapter, all in Peirik Tess, because it's taken over, it's completely in the embrace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's nothing other than that connection. Again, we explained it there. Here we're talking about the Beinoni, which is associated more with the second level, this second level of love. Ava Kiddush B'Eish is driven to, it's not there yet, as we just explained numerous times. So we still ask Hashem, who should have the total dominion in the heart? Please let this love, this kaisef, this desire, this pining to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let that be the sole dominator in the heart, and have the complete dominion over the heart. Is the nefesh b'hamis there? Yeah, of course it's there. It's the Beinoni, so it's not transformed, but let it be subdued. Let it be just a secondary entity, just to follow the guidance of the nefesh elikis. And later the Alter Rebbe is going to say, we need a little bit of nefesh b'hamis to act human, and if it's only nefesh elikis, somewhat we can forget that we have to eat lunch, or tomorrow's dinner, or something, as an example, because it's, for that matter, it says by Hillel, the Alter Rebbe brings in Chav Tes, in Likutei Amorim, there's also a quick away that Hillel, when he went to eat, he says he's going to do chesed, imaluva, kindness with this pauper, because it was an alien entity. Kind of remind himself, we have to go do chesed. He did a lot of chesed, but even though he considered another party when he went to eat. Again, we explained it there also. The nefesh b'hami, the Beinoni, it's not so. So the nefesh b'hami has a potent nefesh b'hami, but let it sit at bay. Follow the instruction, or allow the nefesh elikis to utilize its connection to Ilam Hazeh with the spirit of Shulchan Aruch, the way Hashem wants a yid to live. To eat, yes, and nefesh b'hami establishes that hunger that the person goes and makes himself a sandwich, or eats that sandwich, or allows the person to connect to a drink because the Nefesh Bahamis sends a signal, now you're thirsty. Not with a microphone or not with a whisper, but it just sends that message, as we know. Or when you're eating, now you have to drink. But it's drochecho, as the pasuk says. Actually, the Alter Rebbe concludes this. Igeres with the chol, with this, the chol drochecho. The pasuk says, "Chol drochecho da'eyu," in all your ways, that even in your ways, when you're eating and drinking, any other engagement in matters of Elam Hazeh, da'ehu, you can know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So let it sit and rest at bay, submissive to the guidance of the Nefesh Elikis, which is of course guiding it to live a godly life, to live a Torah life, to live a mitzvah life. As Torah mitzvahs are the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah, Chachma, Raisa, Kol Echad is really one, and that expression, that kaisef, that aspiration to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is inherent with every single yid, and the person brings it to the fore, and it's expressed in the person's mouth, meaning say in his learning Torah and is doing mitzvahs, should fill the entire occupancy of the heart. And this is what we even ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please help us, that the total dominion of the heart should be that love, and nothing else should really stand in the way. And if the Nefesh Bahamis is there, let it just sit low, and just to allow the messages of the Nefesh Elikis to express itself even in matters of Elam Hazeh, like eating and drinking and so on, an engagement of Elam Hazeh, which the Nefesh Bahamis will somewhat allow the person to remember, yes, you're human, but not more. Let it not stand, let it not say its opinion. And as the Alter Rebbe continues over here, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu that it should be moli mimena v'leitachnis tzarasu beveisa. That the tzara, what's a tzara? Tzara means like a tzara, right? A terrible, and it's called a tzara. But we know that in the times when polygamy was permitted, according to Torah, as we know, till the Chayin of the Rebbeinu Gershon, Meir HaGoyla, which he established, the famous two takanas, there should not be polygamy, but according to Torah, the person can have two wives. So according to halacha, the two wives are called tzaros, one to each other, like a pain, one to each other. Why? Because each one is trying to get the attention of the husband, and there's always a rivalry between them, and understandably so. But that was the norm. That's why they're named the tzara one to each other. And in halacha, it's brought Yivam is tzara. It's just for this simple reason. They're a nuisance one to each other for this very reason. So the Alter Rebbe says that the tzara, which is the other love established by Nefesh Bahamis, should not even enter the house. We ask Hashem, let the dominion be completely with a love, this case of the Nefesh Elikis. And the tzara, the Nefesh Bahamis should not be able even to enter into the house, into the edifice, into the domicile of the Yid. For that matter, Alter Rebbe brings the Gemara earlier, in the beginning of Likutei Amarim, he says the Yid is called an Ir Ktana, a city which each melech, each king, each emperor wants to have complete dominance over the city without any space for the other, the currency, the rules, the laws, because the moment the other one creeps in, it's really, I don't have the full control. Each one wants full control. That's what Nefesh wants, full control of the entire city. It means the intellect and the emotions and the thought and the speech and action, everything about the human establishment should be under the tutelage and under the influence of the auspices of the Nefesh Elikis. And the Nefesh Bahamis wants the other way around. Based on this Gemara. So here, the Alter Rebbe kind of says it's two tzaris which want to dominate the home. We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no, let the one which has the full dominion, the Nefesh Elikis, and the loyalty kodetzarasu bevei. So the tzara means that the other party, the other Nefesh, the love of the Nefesh Bahamis, which has this proclivities to matters which are not only worldly or bodily, but animalistic, as we know. Let not that enter even into the house, into the domicile, which we really ask again, because we're the only one who should be in control and have that governing force would be only the Nefesh Elikis. It should not enter into that abode, which is Taibas Elam Hazeh, which is the proclivities of Elam Hazeh, without any purpose, just to connect to worldly matters, to indulge into the pleasures and delicacies of worldly matters. No, we're on a shlichus. We have a mandate. Of course, we have to eat and drink and perhaps eat bread instead of grass and stones. Of course, we do things normal, but for a purpose, for a sake. We're here in a sacred mandate, not just to allow us to allow the Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, to just be mispashit, to just enter into its so to say, allow itself to express its lusts, covets, proclivities, which are usually pointless and meaningless, and sometimes they bring destruction, physically and figuratively, and so on, literally. If they're not guided by any higher and greater purpose. So this is, let the Taivas Elamaz on their own, let that not have any dominance in the Besa, in the abode of the Sheti Akeres Habayis, that the Sheti Hi Akeres Habayis. This case of this love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, she should be the main runner of the home, if you will, meaning say the one who dominates the home, and the one who runs the home, which is known to be Akeres Habayis, the Eshes Chayil, the Jewish woman, the refined woman, who is called Akeres Habayis because she runs the home appropriately in every matter of the home, the seder, the order, the discipline, in every matter. And of course, when I talk about Akeres Habayis in a Jewish home, it's everything plus the main part, again, associated with the sacred mandate of Yid, which comes down to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to transform the world, and that very starting from the very home to an abode for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So she's Akeres Habayis, which makes sure that everything is properly in place and is run the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a home to run. So in this case, that we ask Hashem that He, the Abba, the Abba to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this Abba which we're talking about, this case of, she would be the main part of this which runs an abode of the Yid. And again, it doesn't mean the physical, but in this case, the system of the Yid. Their intellect, their emotions, their thoughts, speech, and action. In other words, they're learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, and so on and so forth. Lim shel b'tzaros, to dominate its tzara, the other party, or the garsha chutzam, and to chase it away completely. Mimachshava dibur ma'asav, thought, speech, and action. Now, where do we find this? You remember the Hagar and Sarah? When Hagar got married to Avraham Avinu, she became a classic Sarah to Sarah, Imenu, and then there was Yitzchak and Yishmael. Sarah gave an ultimatum to Avraham Avinu, or she told him clearly that he got to go. If Yitzchak needs to establish himself and eventually become the progenitor of Am Yisrael, Yishmael has to go because he was causing a lot of trouble. Not only trouble to Yitzchak, tantalizing Yitzchak as a brother, but he was doing things which were the antithesis of the environment, what a home which is supposed to be the home which was supposed to build Am Yisrael, or the environment of the home which was meant to be the spirit of the entire build-up of Am Yisrael through our holy patriarch Yitzchak. And she said, no, it's not going to work if he's going to be there. You got to chase her away, that Avram's home could be clean from the negative, toxic environment Yishmael was bringing. The Gemara says he was involved in all three cardinal sins, for that matter. Can't raise Yitzchak in that environment. Therefore, Gorish, you got to chase him away. In this case, the similar lashon legorsha chutza, to get rid of completely. This tzara, which is the nefesh habahamis, would have its own set of rules, covets, and expansions, just animalistic expansions or drives for animalistic expansions and expressions. From machshava dibur ma'asav, from thought, speech, and action, which means the actions of a yid should be associated with a godly soul. The speech of the yid should be associated with a godly soul, and the thought of the yid, vision, audio, should be associated with a godly soul, with a godly love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and none of the animalistic influence associated with the Nefesh HaBahamis should have any entry there. Completely legorsha hachutza, out of thought, out of speech, and out of action. I'll call upon him at least. What does he say at least? Because we know when we're talking about the Beinoni, as the Alter Rebbe established at the very beginning, one of the fundamental chapters in the entire Tanya is Perek Yud Beis and Yud Gimel. After he pulls in from the previous chapters, from the previous chapters, where he describes it to Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, Tzadik V'Tzadik, and he begins with the Yud Beis, Ve'ha Beinoni, and then he gives an entire description of the Beinoni and Perek Yud Gimel and Perek Yud Dalet. These three are the core, foundational program of the Alter Rebbe's doctrine and most healthy way of thinking about a healthy presentation. That is, for the Eved Hashem, the healthiest presentation for the Eved Hashem. We mentioned many times, Alter Rebbe's manual in Tanya Gadisha is the perfect manual to Avodas Hashem. Nothing is close, even though everyone, we could always glean, Alter Rebbe has a Perek Chavtes. Yeah, look into other Svarim, of course, we glean these Svarim of great Tzaddikim, which Yisedosim. Their information was Yisedosim, Adrei Kodesh, in the highest, holiest of mountains. Then their messages, of course, You could have a device with great manuals, but then you have, and each one contributes to the workings of that device. And it brings all the benefits, but then you have the perfect manual. And you read the perfect manual, you got it right, and you're able to utilize the entire device with all its details and how it has a certain shleimus in the way it contributes to this, which this device is supposed to contribute to your comfort, whatever the device is. Especially it's a sophisticated device and a complex device, which is, yes, Yeridas and Neshama Beguf is very sophisticated and rather very complex, that is. Very complex, if we're only honest. And we need a perfect manual. Tanya is the perfect manual. And Alter Rebbe begins this idea, and he sets the tone, definitely, beginning of Ukoti Amarim. And again, culminating with Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, B'ha Beinani. And one of the things Alter Rebbe says, the Beinani, again, you got to see it, you got to learn it, live it. And to get onto that conveyor belt, the most healthy conveyor belt which ever existed. Because again, it's also the entry of Yemei Mashiach, where the world's going to be a perfect world. Not only B'gashmis, but on all areas. The Yid's Avodas Hashem is going to be a very distinct type of Avodas Hashem, with constantly joy and excitement and passion, even the regular Yid, which would be the Beinani. But one of the things that a person could really navigate the odyssey of Elam Haza without any bumps is when they identify the truth of themselves, which was one of the brilliant parts of the Alter Rebbe's message. First of all, he calls the Sefer brilliantly the Sefer Shal Beinanim, not Sefer Shal Tzadikim. It doesn't say be a tzaddik, which is usually a thread runs across all different svarim. Which of course they told the Yid, Tei Tzaddik Al Tirasha. It's a Braisa, it's a Mishnah. But ultimately, Alter Rebbe explains that also, famously in the 14th chapter, Likutei Amarim. What about the Tei Tzaddik? But in the end of the day, the Alter Rebbe, I say brilliant. You have to always say that when you talk about the Alter Rebbe, brilliant is, you see a brilliance, but no, it's Kodesh Kodashim, it's Hashem's message. So maybe I should take it back. But nonetheless, it's a natural, because you see such brilliance in presenting to the Yid who wants to be an Eved Hashem, who doesn't want to be an Eved Hashem. Look at things the way they are. Don't go to areas which don't belong to you, which is another part of the Alter Rebbe in this Sefer Tanya, and this is one of the reasons called the Sefer Shel Beinanim. Again, this is what the whole Likutei Amarim is all about. So we shouldn't take a look. Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, but you got to understand what the Alter Rebbe says prior to Yud Beis, the 12th. But here the Alter Rebbe pulls in by the 12th, Ve'ah Beinani, and he sets up 3 important, rich, loaded chapters which establish the entire, revolutionarily establishes the entire set and objective and goal and focus and perspective of the Eved Hashem in his or his Avodas Hashem Alei Adamis in this world, establishing an abode for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lasses Leidira Yis Baruch B'Tachteinim, in this very physical world. So one of the things the Alter Rebbe established is the Beinani has a potent Yetzer Hara, a potent Nefesh Bahamis. Never made a dent in it. Really? Who's this Beinani? Is he one of the regular guys off on the street just kind of doing a checklist? No, the Beinani is a very holy Jew. The Rebbe says, he never violates HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mitzvahs, nor in action, nor in speech, nor in thought, right? Video, vision, audio, which is millisecond differences, because the moment they make a decision, in a millisecond, yes, I'm going to look there, think that, but Hashem says, don't look, don't think. It's like we once said, I pulled my eyes away after 5 seconds, that's like kind of eating a few sandwiches on Yom Kippur, because here you're dealing with millisecond decisions, as an example. To be chas v'sholem degraded to the status of a rasha, or to maintain your Beinani status. And the Beinani is careful, not only in action, not only speech, but even vision, audio, thought, which again is millisecond decisions. He's kind of, you think about it as a perfect Jew, like, someone said, bring me the Beinani, I want to see him, I want to shake hands with him. It's a unique level in Avodas Hashem. But together with that, the Alter Rebbe says, no, he has a potent Nefesh Bahamis. Because the moment he makes an indent on his Nefesh Bahamis, he's already on the conveyor belt of the tzaddik. Is it full tzaddik, the tzaddik Omer? No, of course not. So it makes it very clear. In tzaddikim, there's tens of thousands of levels of tzaddikim. And once we understand and we appreciate that the tzaddik is someone who had made an indent on his nefesh bahamis, so how many impacts, how many imprints could you make on that nefesh bahamis? There is no end. That's why it makes you can appreciate what Alter Rebbe brings in this chapter in Yud, in this 10th, right? Likutei Amarim. Also, click away, you can see it. There's a Revoves, again, based on this, which Alter Rebbe quotes. It's not only his description of Alter Rebbe quotes that from Maimari Chazal, which indicate clearly that there's myriads, thousands of levels of tzaddikim. How much of an indent they made on their animal soul and nefesh bahamis? Because the moment the person does make an indent, the nefesh bahamis is already not a beinoni. He's already on the conveyor belt of the tzaddik. Is there room to move on from there? Of course. He says there's Ravabis, myriads of thousands, tens of thousands, tens of thousands of levels of tzaddikim, understandably so. Till the tzaddik gomor, which Alter Rebbe celebrates in the end of that chapter, Yud. But the beinoni has a potent nefesh bahamis. And he didn't make an indent on his nefesh. What does it mean to make an nefesh bahamis? He follows Shulchan Aruch to the T, where it's within his control, her control. In action, no one could tell me what to do, what not to do. Speech, no one could tell me what I should talk. I might have a temptation to talk Lashon Hara, but I could not talk Lashon Hara, as an example. Even thought, Alter Rebbe established the way that Kodesh Baruch Hu created the human being, even prior to the virtue of the Yid, the status of the Yid, but even the human being, the way Hashem created. Again, when Hashem created, that is, the human being is the Meich Shaltal, mind dominates the heart. I can say no even to a very exciting signal coming from my heart to my eyes or ears and want my thought to entertain. I can say no, and if I'm a Yid and I know Hashem does not want me to entertain my eyes or my audio, which would again establish my thought, thinking these thoughts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly writes in its Torah, and it's scriptural, it's biblical. HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes clearly that certain thoughts a person is prohibited to entertain their mind with. A pasuk in Torah, in the end of Parsha Shlach. Of course, in areas of tznius, modesty, and so on, as we know. And the Yid has the ability to stop and say, yeah, the signal is there, but I will not allow that thought to come in even for a millisecond. Again, the beinoni, if he does deliberately allow it to come in, say, I know I'm not allowed to, but I'll allow it in for just for a bit. At that point, he's no more a beinoni, he's a rasha. You got to see the beginning of Likutei Amarim. But does it mean that it's not difficult? Of course, it's difficult, but difficult means to say it's a strain. But that's why we are human beings, which the Eibishter created the human being with Mayach Shalit al Alev. Inherently, the mind governs the heart, meaning that even there's a signal coming from the heart, we have 100%, not 99%, we have 100% control over action, speech, and even thought. Even the subtle faculties, or the subtleties which the faculties of vision, audio are always associated with. But by the beinoni, of course, he is that 100% Shulchan Aruch Yid, which, as the Alter Rebbe makes it clear in the 4th chapter, Likutei Amarim, also click away, that Shulchan Aruch is expressed in thought, speech, and action. What about the inner workings of the Nefesh Bahamis, which is the midas, the seichel of the Nefesh Bahamis, namely the midas of the signals coming from the Nefesh Bahamis, the temptations, the drives, the animalistic drives of the Nefesh Bahamis? Is that transformed by the beinoni? Absolutely not. Not at all. Is this important, vital teaching of the Alter Rebbe. The tzaddik has the ability to transform the inner workings of the Nefesh Bahamis. The beinoni does not. And therefore the signals are always coming in. The Yid has the ability to control these signals, not to allow them to enter where it's relevant, which is action, speech, and thought, vision, audio, and so on. But the signals will always come because the beinoni is not transformed as inner, the midas of that nefesh, which means again the drives, the natural drives of nefesh bahamis. The beinoni did not only subdue, doesn't have the ability to certainly doesn't even have the ability to subdue them. Certainly, he's not in a state of transforming them. that belongs to the tzaddik. And therefore, but there says, calm down. The Nefesh Bahamis is sending you these messages. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's normal. Where you pick up is, are you going to allow that signal to enter into your maisa? Which is action. Are you going to allow that signal to enter into your speech? Are you going to allow that signal to enter into your thought? To allow your eyes to wander in areas which Hashem says you're not supposed to. There you have 100% control. So here the Alter Rebbe continues. It says, Al kol ponim, meaning to say that we ask the Kodesh Baruch Hu to chase it out of the system from machshava, dibur, ma'aser, from thought, speech, and action. Agam shelo yuchol l'shalcha legamer mali, but you can't send it completely away from your heart, as we just explained, because the Beinoni has that Nefesh Bahamis settled in his heart in a way that it continues. It could be throughout a lifetime to send these animalistic signals to the person's action, thought, and speech. So how could you say legarsha hachutzos? Alter Rebbe says legarsha hachutzos is machshava dibur ma'aser, thought, speech, and action, completely. But when it comes to the midas of the Nefesh Bahamis, which is established, Alter Rebbe established, you cannot send it from your heart completely. At least at least that it should stay at bay. Is its head low? It should stay in a state, literally translated, golus, let that be exiled, meaning to say, with the total dominion of the Nefesh Elikis. And va'avdus lakeres abayis, givirto, and complete subordination and submissiveness to the main runner of the home, if you will, the akeres abayis, which is givirto, which is again, it's Tzara, the other woman, in the context of Tzara, as we just explained. To use it just for things which are essential. As a Yid lives, neshama beguf, that he should maintain he should be able to be healthy. In order to be healthy, one has to eat, one has to drink. And of course, the Nefesh Bahamis is this what calls the person, yeah, you're hungry now, go bite into that sandwich, or take a good drink of water, or whatever you're eating, or any other type of engagement with an Elam Haza, which Teda tells you that we must engage in Elam Haza in order to live with Shmarta Ma'id L'Nafshei Seichem. And when you sit down, you're not mandated. When you're mandated to eat, it's okay to eat something which has a bit of taste. As an example, you don't have to sit and eat grass and stones because you don't want to benefit or you want to derive any pleasure from matters of Elam Haza. Perhaps sublimate that pleasure. Yes, eat something which perhaps is tasty, but in the end of the day, the message, the mandate and the shlichus of the neshama in Elam Haza, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu mandated you individually to fulfill your purpose. Lasses leis baruch tira b'tachteinim, to make a dwelling place, an abode for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, should imbue that very bite, that very meal, that very drink, or any other engagement matters of Elam Haza, as the Alter Rebbe, as the Rambam famously in Hilchos Deis, and it's elaborated later in the Tur Reish Lamed Aleph. You can see, based on the pasuk B'chol drachecha do'eyu, in all your ways know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which this pasuk is telling us something very revolutionary, which means there's Darkei Hashem, and then there's Drachecha. We know that a Yid comes down into this world to get involved, to identify with the Darkei Hashem, to do mitzvahs, to learn Torah, to stay away from this, what Hashem says, do not. Not to do, no one's a loisesa, that's the Darkei Hashem. What about Drachecha? My eating, my drinking, my overall engagement with worldly matters. That's my drachim, says Torah, this pasuk, brought in Mishlei, b'chol drachecha, even this is your ways, do'ehu, you have the ability and opportunity, and it's incumbent upon you to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when you sit down to a meal, and even the meal is a decent meal, also again, you don't have to overly indulge, because someone's full and they can't put anything in their mouth, and the eye catches something which is good taste, and you're just going to run over it and stuff yourself. That's very animalistic, and For that matter, Taita says that could be problematic. Deishim Tiyu, a person has to sanctify himself. As the famous Ramban says, not to be a novel b'shus Taita, say, oh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shulchan Aruch says it's okay, and therefore there's a green light for me. No, Deishim Tiyu, a person has established discipline even in matters which are formally kosher and formally permitted. One has to sanctify himself. We're called an Am Kodesh, a holy nation. But even when someone does the regular, he eats a meal, he's not demanded that he should eat grass because he doesn't want to benefit from El Mazik. Okay, eat like a mensch. But in your eating, which is drochecho, the ability to do'ehu, to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to sense that I'm eating for a purpose. I should be able to be full. I should be able to go back to my learning, to my studying, or have the koyach to go help somebody, to do chesed, to do a mitzvah. As the Rambam says, so your eating becomes part of the Avodas Hashem, serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is that the same as putting on tefillin or lighting a Shabbos candle? Of course not, because that's Darkei Hashem, this is Drochecho. But nonetheless, you're able to find the Do'ehu, to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In your Drochecho, in your ways, as the Elosh of the Rambam, that ultimately establishes an Avodas Hashem encompassing the entire 24 hours of your day. Because when you eat, it's for a godly purpose, your sleeping is for a godly purpose, any type of engagement in worldly matters is for a godly purpose, so the entire 24 hours, you're categorically serving Hashem. And again, elaborated there in Reish Lamed Aleph in the Torah. So who establishes, who has that, who calls upon, who invites the person to eat as an example, establishes that hunger? It's a nefesh elikis? No. The nefesh elikis is only hungry for one thing. The nefesh elikis has one aspiration. He wants elukus. And it wants a lot of elukus. And the only thing that satisfies the nefesh elikis is elukus. Take away elukus, and the nefesh elikis is devastating because it is elukus. It's a just part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't have any interest in eating or drinking. So who brings the person in to establish that hunger or that thirst as an example? Of course, the nefesh bahamis. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says, you have to be around this Gvirta, this other party in the Beisa, in this abode of the Yid, the Nefesh Bahamis has to be there. It just has to be there in a way that how it could serve the purpose of allowing the Yid to maintain their health and to be able to navigate their odyssey of Avodas Hashem without interruption. Meaning that the Nefesh Bahamis invites the person, says, okay, now you're hungry and probably have to eat something, because if Nefesh Bahamis would not send that signal from the perspective of Shalikis, the person would not go ahead and eat. We mentioned before about Hillel Azakin as an example. And what happens if you don't eat 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? Yeah, you expire, so the Neshama goes back to where it would go, Rahman al-Islam. And the Yid is not able to continue executing their mandate, which they were sent to this very physical world to establish a dira for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's something good that Nefesh Bahamis is going to bring to the plate, to the establishment of the Yid's Avodas Hashem, the calling that the Yid should be able to maintain their health and their well-being. You're hungry, now you're thirsty. So the Alter Rebbe, it's not a contradiction what we said before to get rid of it completely. Yeah, get rid of it completely from your thought, speech, and action. You should have no opinion how you should think, how you should talk, and how you should do, how you should act. And the dominator of the Yids, Mashab Ramais, is to be solely the Nefesh Elikis. Legarsha, anything else to be completely chased away, similar like we said with Sarah and Hagar. But when it comes to the Nefesh Bahamis, the Tzaddik transformed his Nefesh Bahamis, completely transformed the Nefesh Bahamis, like the Alter Rebbe we brought before in Perek Tes, Kimei Yitzatayv Mamish, the Alter Rebbe quotes the Zayir, like Yitzatayv. It's incredible. Again, you have to see those chapters. What does it mean in Nefesh Bahamis, like Yitzatayv? Like, really? Yes, by Tzaddik he can. But that's the Avodah of the Tzaddik. The Beinoni, no, it has a strong and potent Nefesh Bahamis. Kigvur Kituldosa, the Alter Rebbe says the way it was born. There was no indent in that Nefesh Bahamis. The moment there is, he's already on the path of the Tzaddik, the conveyor belt of the Tzaddik. Now he's a Beinoni, he has a potent Nefesh Bahamis. So what does it mean that the Nefesh Bahamis should not be there at all? No, it's inevitably there, because the inner workings of Nefesh Bahamis, the signals, the midas of Nefesh Bahamis, the animalistic drives and temptations, the proclivity of the Nefesh Bahamis are always there. So how do you get rid of it? You can't. He's a Beinoni. So Alter Rebbe says, let it just be there in just to serve, stand in submission to the Akeres Abayas, to the Nefesh Elikis, which are running the whole entire system, just to allow the Yid to be healthy, because the Nefesh Bahamis is going to call the Yid to eat and to drink. Again, the Nefesh Bahamis is the one who establishes that sensation of hunger or thirst. I come directly from so okay. So you're going to be there just to serve the grander scheme, the grander picture, the grander message of the Nefesh Elikis, associated with the mandate of the Nefesh Elikis. So does it mean that? But dominance, dominion? No, not at all. We ask Hashem that we need your assistance. Li is be'ezreinu, as Lashon al Tereb earlier, that would stand on the surface and come out of the state of misuteres, like we said before, and stand at the fore and beyond that, on the surface and beyond the surface, meaning to say that it should be the total dominator of the entire bayis of the Yid, physically, but namely figuratively, the whole system of the Yid should be completely under the tutelage and under the spirit of the Nefesh, message of the Nefesh Elikis. And Nefesh Bahamis should be completely gone. Thought, speech, and action out, not even a bit. But even there where it exists, the signals of Nefesh Bahamis should not chas v'shalom signal Nefesh Elikis, or the signal of the bayis to be run in a different way, not aligned with the way Hashem wants the bayis of the Yid to run. The system of the Yid to run, no, not at all. But nonetheless, it would be completely serve the purpose as established the drachecha of the Yid, but in the end of the day, it should be for the doehu, to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which again, it would serve the purpose of the Avedas Hashem of the Yid, not only this which is associated with Darkei Hashem, but also drachecha, and so ultimately, the one who's really leading the entire bias, the entire system, is the Nefesh Elikis.